Hey there and welcome back to another Ms. Marvel video. And today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, Crushed, which follows the aftermath of Kamala discovering that she's somehow developed superpowers and accidentally destroying AvengerCon before getting reamed out by her mother for lying to her and going to the convention even though she'd been expressly forbidden from attending. And I thought the first episode was lots of fun. It established the tone of the story and introduced the characters in a fun way. This episode, I don't know, I still enjoyed it, but I felt it was less good. Yeah, it continued establishing the story, but we're still yet to really get into the plot properly. But at the same time, it still was a really fun experience, and it was very engaging from a character development perspective. And so with all that being said, let's jump into the episode. We start off the episode with Kamala turning up at school, but now she's new and improved, with increased confidence since she's unlocked superpowers, and thus, she has her own little Spider-Man 3 strut scene. A scene where she thinks like she seems like the coolest person in the world, but kind of comes across like a bit of a dweeb. But regardless, great throwback. I was kind of expecting this to be revealed as a bit of a fantasy, but nope, it's real. Anyway, after a few moments of supposed glory, she bumps into a new love interest and obvious shady character Kamran, with whom she exchanges love hard eyes, before she also crashes into Bruno, with whom she discusses her powers. Or rather, what her powers aren't. And I really like the reference here to Paul Rudd's just lack of aging. And so obviously that's also a common trait for Scott Lang. And I like that we saw Kamala get tempted about revealing that she has powers so that she can get some social media clout. Because realistically, that would go through almost anybody's mind. A fantasy about how they'd reveal their powers and then become super rich and famous. And obviously, that isn't what ends up happening, but I like that they showed the more human reaction to all of this. We then move on to the cafeteria where Zoe's bragging about her encounter with the hero that she's dubbed Nightlight, and advertising that she's going to be hosting a party at her house to celebrate the fragility of life, which Kamala doesn't initially want to go to, until she discovers her new crush Kamran will be there. And thus, immediately, she changes her tune and declares that she's going to the party. And honestly, this was the point my spidey sense started tingling regarding this new character. I have no idea why, he just seems so sus. Also, poor Bruno. Moving on though, we then got a training montage that was very reminiscent of Shazam, where Kamala and Bruno test out her powers to see what her capabilities are. And I really enjoyed this scene. It might have felt a little bit samey to Shazam, but honestly, that film didn't really pioneer this kind of thing either, so it didn't feel like too much of a rip-off. And I really enjoyed it as well because she didn't magically become super competent, strong, and fit. She's not all that good at the physical side of her powers. She isn't super strong, she isn't super fast, she doesn't have endless endurance. And best of all, she does not master her abilities overnight. She's honestly pretty awful at using her powers to begin with. And even after her training, not all that much has changed in that regard. She's a bit better, but not great. And we also got a bit of fun exposition during this scene as well. The revelation that Kamala is probably not 100% human after all, so they haven't completely changed her backstory. It's just the bangle unlocked these powers. And then on top of this, they crammed some humor into the scene as well. First, when she excitedly asks if she's part Asgardian, and therefore related to Thor, and then when they recreate the Black Widow death scene from Endgame, down to the lines delivered. We then move on from this to a scene where Kamala and her friend Nakia attend her local mosque. And since I am uncultured to the max and completely unreligious, I have no idea if her experiences in this scene are accurate whatsoever. So the big takeaway from this is that Kamala's friend Nakia is going to start moving into a sort of social justice storyline, beginning with improving women's representation at the mosque to ensure that their experience improves, although I would hesitate to vote for anybody that is so foolish as to leave expensive shoes in a communal area where literally anybody could steal them, and then they get stolen. Rookie error in any walk of life. We then return to Kamala's house where she has an awkward interaction with her mum and then asks if she can go over to Zoe's house, as she's having a few people over, including Bruno and Nakia. And despite the fact that she'd previously completely broken her mother's trust, literally the previous night, she's able to somehow get away with this and convince her mum to let her go. And I'm guessing this is one of those I'll be with my responsible friends moments. And so her mum trusts it's going to be fine. Either that or her mum realizes that she's already snuck out once and she might do so again if she outright refuses. So having these preset conditions is a better idea. To me, it's probably one of those two things. But sucked in, mum, because it's a party after all. And she and Bruno arrive to find Nakia being creeped on by some random called Miguel. I mean, have we seen this dude before? But anyway, after accidentally drinking some spiked orange juice, the group watch Kamran, the crush, jump off the roof into the pool, and then do the classic stride out of the water dripping wet thing, which of course renders the ladies speechless and has Bruno's jealousy meter start ticking. And things only get worse from here, as after the cops come and the kids all scatter, the gang, and Miguel, and also a random dude called Paul, catch a ride back with Kamran, who flirts with Kamala the entire time, and she flirts back. And Bruno gets progressively more and more jealous. Ugh, cringe. He then gives her his number so that he can take her for a driving lesson before he leaves, and she returns home on a high, breaking out into an impromptu song and dance number, which I found quite funny. Once again, it felt like a very mid-2000s teen romance film, this scene. Hell, even the love interest guy looks like he came straight out of that era. I don't know what it is about him, but he just has that quality. It really does take me back. Moving on though. In class on Monday, Kamala finds her powers going haywire and goes to the bathroom to hide, prompting Nakia to try and connect with her to try to get her to open up about what's been going on. And of course, she lies to her best friend, and it's clear that this is going to come back to bite her in the ass with broken trust, etc, etc. Especially when it comes out that Bruno knew the whole time. And on top of that, Nakia even opens up to her about all her struggles with identity and acceptance, so it's like a double whammy of broken trust. She even got her clothes and jewellery for her date. Man, she doesn't deserve this sort of shabby treatment. Moving on though, we then have a scene where Bruno discovers from the school counsellor that he's been accepted into Caltech, and seems to be debating not taking this full ride scholarship and staying in New York instead. I'm guessing for Kamala. Simp mode, engage. And I'm thinking that he's actually going to accept this off screen, thinking that she has something else going on with Kamran. It feels like the direction they're probably going to take, and it's going to cause some significant drama, whether that drama manifests later this season or in some future property the characters appear in. And it's made especially apparent that this is a very big possibility when he goes to talk to her and she kind of just blows him off and says she has a driving lesson. I mean, yeah, he's totally going to have accepted this thing off screen, isn't he? But no time for that now, because we have her driving lesson with Kamran, and she has not improved at all and continues to be a liability behind the wheel. But regardless, they're not killed in a collision, and they proceed to a cafe to continue their date, but are interrupted by Kamala's brother and his fiancée. The brother, I don't know if he actually believed it, but he went along with it regardless, is sold the lie that Kamran is actually their cousin. And honestly, he might actually be their cousin based on what's revealed at the end of the episode, but that's for later. But Taisha certainly knew what was up. I mean, the side-eye to Kamala and getting Amir out of there pronto. Good future sister-in-law, I gotta say. And we move from after-school date to family dinner, where we start off with just a wholesome look at the Khan family. A lot of the stuff we've seen previously has been kind of negative in the past. It's not terrible, but it's a little bit dysfunctional. So it's nice to see the more positive elements of the family's relationships too. And then the topics get a little bit heavier as they begin to talk about the cultural trauma caused by the partition of India, Bangladesh and Pakistan, and how Muniba's mother, who was a toddler at the time, was separated from her parents whilst trying to board a train and was guided back to her father by a trail of stars. Sounds familiar. And then on top of that, her mother was apparently never seen again, so yeah. Her mum used some powers to save her, I'm guessing? Maybe? Who knows? But then if the great-grandmother had the bangle, how would the grandmother have gotten it? Unless you don't need the bangle after it activates the powers. So many questions, and so few answers right now. But then Kamala has a vision that makes her faint of a woman reaching out for her right after they talked about her great-grandmother, so I'm guessing there's something going on there. Later, Kamala tries to call her grandmother to get some information, and is completely brushed off and told that her mother would get upset if she told her anything. And so, Kamala just decides to bite the bullet and ask her mum, who then gets very upset and says that her great-grandmother brought shame onto the entire family. So, yes, there is definitely a lot more to this story. Moving on to the next day, we see the family attending Eid, with Bruno wearing traditional clothing and trying to fit in, and then getting clowned on by Kamala and Amir. Before Nakia begins to bribe food vendors for their support in the upcoming mosque council vote, before turning her attention to her friends, who she mobilizes to talk to the various different groups within the community to try and secure their votes. And this gives Kamala the opportunity to volunteer to go and talk to the Illuminantes to try and both get them to vote for Nakia, but also learn a little bit more about her great-grandmother. And whilst this is happening, Nakia shames and bullies Kamala's dad into supporting her for the election by implying that he's holding back women's rights and suffrage, claiming him as a surrogate parent, talking about how America's the land of freedom and opportunity, and all that good stuff. Before loading him up with a poster and a badge and going on her merry way, leaving him looking like a stunned mullet. And this was actually one of my highlights for the episode. The dad is one of the best characters in the show. He has the best lines and the best facial expressions. The actor's great. We then cut to Zoe, who's being interrogated by the Department of Damage Control about AvengerCon, using some classic good cop, bad cop techniques. First, using their knowledge of her social media presence to butter her up, before taking what she says out of context and trying to manipulate her into saying what they want to hear. And then on top of that, trying to nail down who Nightlight really is. And then they decide to racially profile, but they try to do it in a respectful way. Also, apparently in 2025, the FBI is still surveilling mosques and Islamic communities, even after space aliens and all that. I feel like they should have more important things to worry about. Back at the party, Kamala has spent the last couple of hours, it seems, chilling with the aunties, trying to rustle up the gossip about her great-grandmother. And we don't really learn a whole lot, but it does seem like she was a very divisive figure, and nobody can quite agree what she did. Some say she was a snake who cursed everything she touched. Some say she had a secret affair and ran away with him, or that she had a secret second family, or that she killed a man during the partition. And honestly, of all of these, I'm going to guess that that final one might be true, but we'll see. We then move on to see some idiot child leaning out the window of the mosque trying to get a cool selfie and almost falling to his death, only held up by a curtain which is quickly breaking. And so, Kamala runs off to suit up so that she can save the day, and manages to do so. But she poses, she loses focus, she has a creepy vision of that woman again, and then the kid falls and breaks a leg. Whoopsie. It was nice to see her first attempt at being a hero didn't end with an overwhelming success, if I'm being honest. So many heroes are just suddenly good at what they do, but it doesn't work out that way for her. And it just adds to her charm and makes me feel like she needs to earn her spot as a hero, which is really refreshing. But at this point, she's confronted by the Department of Damage Control, who try to apprehend her, and she somehow escapes using her powers, and with a handy getaway car, driven by none other than Kamran. And the agents somehow are unable to notice that a car very obviously drove by, stopped, and then sped off. I mean, get a clue, unless this is some spirit car. Anyway, a woman speaks to Kamala from the back seat, and it turns out that she's the creeper from the visions, and she's also Kamran's mother. Awkward. Man, they really didn't hold off on the Kamran's probably a villain reveal very long, did they? He was literally introduced this episode and then bam. So yeah, I'm curious to see where they go from this. And are they going to be related? Because that's one way to kill off any sort of romance, isn't it? Is that woman the great-grandmother? A descendant of the great-grandmother? Just a random woman? Who knows? And I'm actually really excited to see where they do take this storyline. I think it has a lot of potential. But that's the end of the episode. And so I would like to remind you that these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.